Thinking about self-publishing and don't know where to start? Join the Spa Girls each week for 30 minutes of honest advice, tips, and resources. I'm Trudy J, and I'm here with Cheryl Phipps.
Hi there.
Shah Barrett.
Hello.
Wendy is not with us, but we still have Ines.
Yay!
Didn't let it go.
No.
We kept her here with us for another week.
Little does she
We're
know.
moving it down to New Zealand.
Yeah.
As
We're adopting
soon as
you.
I can, as soon as the plane start
Got a
flying
spare
over
room.
again.
A spare room with your name on it.
Yep.
Awesome. So Ines, in case anyone didn't listen to last week's amazing episode, but go back and listen to it right now if you
Shame
didn't.
on you.
As an author, she's got 3 different pen names, but she came from a screenwriting / television background, and she's got all this knowledge that we are going to suck dry from her. Suck dry? I don't think that's quite the one I need. Suck from her anyway.
Moving on.
And so we're going to go through, and it's going to be 7 tips that authors can take from screenwriting to make their books amazing and get a 70% read through, just like Ines. No promises.
You are hung up on that percentage
Yes,
figure,
so
are you
hard.
not?
Yeah.
Oh, clearly
No
numbers
pressure
work for
there,
Trudy.
Ines.
Yeah, no
Really?
pressure.
No pressure. Oh, yeah, say hello instead of just letting me get on.
All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be back.
Oh, good, awesome. You're not scared at all? You're not scared of us?
Not
now?
even a little bit.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
do this.
All right, so we've got our 7 things. Let's start with number 1, seasons. What's a season? What does it mean? How does it work?
So think about a season used to be an actual like time period, like the fall season premiere of television shows, or the spring new season. And then sometimes there was a summer season as well, where things kind of got dumped in there. So there's about 3 seasons that typically happen in television. And usually you'd have, depending upon what kind of show it is, there's like an hour-long show, you'd have like 12, 13 episodes of a full season. And then if it was comedy, you might have 13, or you might have about 26 of those. So the way that you can think about it, the way that's easier to think about it in novel writing is, think of it in 3s, 3, 6, or 9, or 12 parts or books in your story or serial.
Okay, and why does it help to think of it in those terms? Like, how does it help?
I am a huge believer in having a long series for the win. There's a statistic out there, and I can't remember the exact number, but let's pretend it's a million words. When someone reads 1 million of your words, they're your fan. And I don't think that's the right number. But if you can write that many words, and even more, if you can keep us with the same story of a character or characters that you've already had, you've developed empathy with the readers, you've gotten us to look at their goals, and we've seen their growth and their fall downs and their get ups, and they got the girl, they lost the girl, they triumphed. If you already have us hooked into that particular person or that particular world, why not keep it going for as long as you can?
Yeah, that's very true. So if you're planning, why plan a series like that instead of just one book? Like, is it about just hooking them in through the season, or like, is it easier to write when you know what's going to happen at the end of 6 books? Or
the honest thing is, Ines doesn't know how to write a standalone. That's I don't understand. That's a film. So here's the thing. A standalone to me is like a film. You go in, you're a captive audience, you sit there, you watch from the beginning to the end, and then you leave, and there's no place else to go. You might talk about it, but eventually you're going to go and see another film. You're going to be held captive for another 90 minutes, and then you're going to go on. But think about all the hype that gets built around trilogies, like the Star Wars trilogy or the Hunger Games, in the Harry Potter films. When you tell when you're in it for the longer game, you get readers invested in your words, and you hit that goal of getting them to read a certain amount of your words for them to be a lifelong fan. I think it's easier to do that with a series than it is to do that with standalones. I'm not saying standalones don't work. My brain just doesn't understand them.
Yeah.
So just to clarify for romance, though, we can have different couples. It's a different romance in each episode, if you like, of the season.
I think that you can have a series where it's the same couple. I think that's hard. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think it's just hard because we know when we're watching a television show and there's that push-pull of the couple, will they get together or won't they? Inevitably, when they get together, there's some tension loosens.
Yeah.
So many TV series that die because when they get together, right? Like it loses everything.
It's hard. It's like when you got married, yay, and now
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you got to keep the fires going,
Yeah.
and you have to figure that out. But I think a series or a serial works best when a serial is, you're usually a lot of times when authors are serializing, they're doing it for a short amount of time. Like they have an end goal in mind. It's almost like a story that's broken and they have an end goal in mind. Whereas a series, it's typically going to be a different, if I speak romance, I'm sorry, I don't speak many other languages, I speak romance. So if you have a series of romance novels, it's typically going to be set in the same world, but you're going to follow a different couple with each book. And you're going to have like cameos and appearances from the past couples, which is going to get people there because they already know and they empathize with and they like and they care about that other character. No, they get to see them in their happily ever after. And it's cool that if they're have a happily ever after, because you don't have to worry about their conflicts anymore. They might be having them, but you don't have to worry about that. You're focused on the new conflict. You get some of the happy. This couple gets their happy ending, and then you move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
But you've incorporated those the same setting and those other people to make people feel like they're moving in the same direction with the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So a series of books does not necessarily have to be read in order, but a serial or a serialized novel you have to read in order. And think about it. A book like Twilight, that's a serial. You have to read. You can't just go and just start to read Breaking Dawn and think you got it. You don't got it. You got to go back to the first book. So Harry Potter is a serial. You have to start at year 1 to truly understand all of those books. So yeah, and so if you look at Nalini's saying and her Side Changeling series, that's a series. That some of those books are series where you can read them out of order, but some of them are serialized where you have to read them in order to understand what the heck is going on.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's also different, like it's harder to do the one where it's the same characters for each book. For romance, like it's urban fantasy, for example, where I write, you keep the same main character. People get upset with you if you change the main character through the series. You have romance, but it has to be able to go through. Versus a romance book, it's harder to think of I noticed a contemporary romance. Has there ever been a contemporary romance, aside from ones that are written like duologies with massive cliffhangers, where they are right?
Probably. I just couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I just nothing pops to mind.
I'm sure there are, but I don't think it could possibly be a long series. As you say, once the couple gets together and they marry or they're in a long-term relationship.
I think Marie Force has one. I think she has a thriller suspense romance where the couple is like married or something.
Well, yeah, there's definitely that romantic suspense angle, like JD Robb. Who's the Eve Duncan series?
You've got other factors though, in or the genre that introduce the conflict, whereas romance, it's about overcoming, isn't it? So
anyway, sorry, that's just a side note. Let's move back on to the main topic. So that's seasons, and we've talked about series versus serial. Is there anything else we need to know about those two, series versus serial? Are we kind of we've covered that?
I think we've got that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to scene and beat. So what exactly does that mean? I want you to explain what a beat is, because I hear people talking about it all the time and I've never really understood it. So now I've got you captured on the podcast. You're going to explain it for me.
So a scene, I like to think of a scene as it's kind of capsulated by time and space. It's happening in a bedroom. It's happening outside at the crime scene. It's happening in time and space. A beat, and so you can have a lot of different scenes within a chapter, or you can have a lot of different scenes within a beat. A beat is for think of the main plotting system that you use. Maybe you use the hero's journey. Maybe you use the save the cat method. Maybe you use the romancing the beats. A beat is a category, a section of action that has to happen in order to satisfy a movement of the story. For example, if I say the meet cute, we all know what that is. There's a meet cute beat that has to happen in a romance because the hero and the heroine have to meet at some point, and they could meet. That could take place over different scenes, but all those scenes together is the beat.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
You're welcome very much.
So why, as authors, is it helpful for us to think in scenes rather than, say, chapters, and beats rather than?
It's gonna depend on how your brain works. So one way isn't better than the other. My brain is used to being in television and film. My brain is used to physically going to a place, setting up the cameras and the lights, and getting the actors and the actresses in place, filming that scene that takes place in that space and time, packing everything and everyone up, moving on to the next scene. That's how my brain just has been trained to work. So when I then get back to the edit room and I'm putting all that stuff together, it may go into, we call it a sequence, a beat in TV. When it's written down on paper, it's a beat. When it's in the editing machine, it's called a sequence. All that stuff will happen together, but we're pulling from these different places and these different times. You can do the same thing with chapters. So you can think of, you could think of a chapter as a beat, but that the chapters can span, maybe you might have 3 chapters just in one beat.
Yeah.
You might have one chapter as a beat. You might have a beat that kind of sandwiches itself in between chapters. So they're just different ways to quantify what's taking place in the story.
I just recently switched from writing chapter by chapter to scene by scene, and I have to say, to me, it's so much easier writing by scenes, because a chapter kind of constrained it in a way. And the only reason I switched was because I wrote the witchy books, as we call them, with a friend of mine, Tanya, and she writes scene by scene, and she didn't understand this whole thing I had with writing by chapters, so she made me write by scenes. And as we went through and did it, I was like, wow, this is so much better. And it's kind of because you're thinking of it, and when you're thinking by chapter, it's sort of, whereas if I'm writing a scene and I suddenly get to a point where I'm like, right, this is the bit where it needs to end, this chapter, and it's going to hook people into the next chapter. It seemed a lot easier to do that than writing by chapter by chapter. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on scenes versus beats. So the beats are those kind of big moments, like the black moment, and the beat
exactly,
and the no return door thingy in the middle. And, okay, so that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything else we need to know about scenes and beats? How to make them work? What do you have any tips about what works as when you're writing a novel in terms of
truly figure out what makes sense to your brain? If some people, I write in Scrivener, so I'm going to talk to Scrivener speak. Some people will go into Scrivener, make a folder, and then put all the scenes of a chapter or all the scenes of a beat together and just put those in, and that's their capsule. Some people for me, I write all of my beats, or all of my chapters are a beat. So, and everyone, it's labeled too. This is the ordinary world that I might pull from the hero's journey. This is the meet cute. This is the fun and games section beat that I might pull from the Save the Cat, because to me, I need for there to be a purpose for that chapter or that beat to be there. So that is the best tip that I can have for you. Make sure that whatever that capsule, whichever term you're using, make sure it has a purpose, and it's just not there to just be there.
That's a really good point.
Even if it's pretty and they're having a lovely afternoon tea, it doesn't actually do anything.
Kill your darlings.
Doesn't move the story forward.
It took me ages to figure out what that meant, the kill your darlings thing, and I'm guessing that's what that means. It's just kind of pretty writing for the sake of it, not necessarily driving the story forward. Okay.
It's not wrong.
Yeah. but
it's the but. Awesome. So let's move on to the teaser, which is tip number 4 that we can take across from screenwriting.
So one of the things that I would recommend, if you really are interested in learning screenwriting, you can go and buy the craft books. Don't take classes unless that's your learning style. If you work best by a teacher instructing you, then yes, go take classes. If you learn best by books, do that. But the best advice that I can give you is download scripts. A lot of them are free. You can go just Google television script, and I recommend you download television scripts. Film is a different beast, because when you see the television scripts, a lot of times you're going to see them broken up into acts, depending upon if it's a 30-minute or 60-minute television show. You're going to see it broken up into 4 to 6, maybe even 8 acts, and the acts are by a commercial break. So when you talk about a teaser, another word that we would use as novelists for teaser is a prologue. But we use teasers in television, and sometimes you'll see it written in the script that this is the teaser. Let me explain what a teaser is. I was trying to think, like, what television shows do we all probably have in common? Because I'm over here in America and y'all are in New Zealand. I was like, what do we have in common?
Our TV is basically American here, so
no, you don't need to worry.
So think about if you've watched episodes of Friends, or think about if you've watched episodes of The Good Place, which was just on. A lot of comedies will do this, or if you watch CSI. So let me start with CSI, because if you watch that, or you probably know that this is kind of a joke now. When you see the main detective and he comes to the crime scene and they see the body and then he rips off his glasses and he says some snarky comment. Yeah, that's the teaser. The show hasn't started yet, but you have about 30-45 seconds of setting the scene. You're starting kind of before the story starts, which is what a prologue does. Well, a prologue gives you an alternate starting point or jumping point into the story, and that's what a teaser does. It kind of sets the tone for what's about to happen for the next 30 or 60 minutes. So when you do that, and then you kind of have the show's catch theme, or the credits come up, and then it introduces you into the first actual chapter, or the first act, the first scene of the book. And you can do that too in your book with the prologue. But when you're thinking about it, you want to think about it as giving a different starting point or jumping off point into your book.
Okay, so that's really cool. So when you say jumping off point, so is it designed as a like to hook people in? Like, is it like you make it so intriguing that they want to go to the first chapter? How does it?
You can think of Twilight did this. Stephanie Meyer did this, which makes me wonder if she had some training as a television writer. She in Twilight, and I haven't read this book in so long, but you, before the story starts, you see Bella at the final moment of the book where she's she's basically she's about to die, and she's kind of thinking to herself like she'd do it all again or something like that. That's a prologue, but it's also a teaser. It makes you, it kind of opens up some questions. You know that she's about to be in some kind of danger, and then you flip the page and her life is just now changing. She's not in any danger. Things are just starting, but you were introduced to the world into a different position. If you've ever watched the the pilot episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, this does it too. So with Bella in Twilight, we kind of got introduced to her and her circumstances. In Buffy the Vampire Slayer, we got introduced to the world of the Hellmouth. We don't see Buffy yet. The way that show opens up its teaser is you have this guy coming into the high school, and you have a girl in a Catholic school uniform following him in. So we see that, and we get the idea that this is going to take place in a high school. So that's the kind of the tone that it's giving us. And then the guy, you see the guy trying to, make his moves on the girl, and you're starting to feel a little sorry for her because she's in a dark place. No one's around, and this guy is about to make some moves. And then we turn, and she's a vampire. So the tone that gives you, it lets you know this is going to take place in high school. It lets you know it's going to take place in this mystical world of the Hellmouth. And it lets you know that who you think is going to be harmless and helpless, it's not true. Yeah. And then when we open, we meet our heroine, and we have an idea of what she's about to be faced with.
Yeah, and that's cool. That's awesome. Yeah. So that's the teaser. If we want to do teasers, that's how we do it. Okay,
do you do those in all your books,
no.
Ines?
Not necessarily. In the first book, probably. What I actually do, and this is jumping ahead, so in the first book in the series, I would do this. And then I basically take the teaser for the next book and I put it at the end.
Nice.
We'll get to that.
Yeah. Next, actually. Oh, no, not next. So the next tip is leads or launches. So could you explain what that means? And
so there's different ways to get into scenes in not just in television, but in novel writing. So I already talked a bit about how you can lead with the character when I talked about Bella, or I don't remember the CSI guy's name, but you see CSI that character, the CSI guy. You see that detective, you see him, and he comes onto the scene, and he is kind of launching us into this week's episode. Or with friends, like if Joey makes a joke, he's launching us into that episode, and we see maybe this is going to be a Joey heavy episode. Or you can have a setting lead, where we saw with the Hellmouth that we got introduced to the world before we got introduced to the main character. So you can lead with the setting. And again, these would be your words instead of us just using visuals. There can also be a narrative lead, which is kind of hard. The only example that I could think about that does this, or did this, do you remember the Desperate Housewives show?
Yes.
Where it was narrated by
that show.
Yes.
It was narrated by the woman who died.
That's right.
She launched us into that first proper scene. And she launched us into a lot of scenes, telling us, and she was an unreliable narrator, remember that? And she would launch us into, this is what you need to know, this is what's happening, this is what they think, but they might be wrong. So we're watching one thing, but we're listening to her, and we're getting a different idea of what's happening here. So setting, narrative, and it's action. So then you also have the action lead. The best representation that I could think of this was Game of Thrones. So, and I hope I'm remembering this correctly. In the first episode of Game of Thrones, we meet Ned Stark, and he has his sons. He's brought them to watch him basically execute someone. And that's how we're introduced to this world. Ned tells them, this is who we are, this is what we're supposed to do, this is how we are the leaders that we need to be, and he chops the guy's head off. So that lets you know what
we're all sitting here a little bit wide-eyed going, oh my god,
yeah.
just bought into.
Yeah, that lets you know. And I read the book, and I think the book starts, it's still action, but I think the book starts with the uncle who disappears, but it's still action. They open the first two scenes, the first two chapters with action.
Yeah, I do that. I open with action. I kind of have a fight scene or whatever.
But it's good to, I should say that it's good to switch it up. Like if all of your scenes open with action, the readers are going to start to know that that's what's about to happen. So the whole point in labeling these guys was to let you know, hey, switch it up a little bit. Because a lot of times I open with setting. The sun was shining bright. For all the times that I'm talking about a sun in the first chapter, I need red ink splashed through it. So I need to remind myself, hey, you the last two chapters you opened with the sun rising or the sun setting. Try something different.
So this is at the beginning of every chapter. You're thinking about how you're leading it into the story.
Exactly.
So what's a launch? What's the launch then? Is that something?
It's just another
word for
lead. Some people call them leads. Some people call them scene launches. I've heard another writing teacher call this a scene launch, where in television we call them leads.
Okay, oh, that makes sense. Awesome. So that's really interesting, because sometimes we just sort of sit down and go, where shall I start? I know, blah, blah, blah. And so actually putting a bit of effort in and like sitting down, this is almost something you would do at the editing stage, right? You'd look at every single scene in your book and kind of think, is this the right way to launch into the scene? Is this, what can I do differently? How can I make this better?
That's right.
I don't think about a lot of this stuff until editing.
And often in fiction, we kind of taught in the craft classes, they talk about the start of the book, but very little is paid to how you start each scene or each chapter. So that's really good. Nice.
We should be thinking just as much about every scene as we should we do it.
Which makes complete sense. And also with just dialing back a little bit back to the teaser, when you think about what's downloaded as a sample, if you're going to hit them, that's it. Rather than sort of Buffy going about getting ready for school, starting with that Hellmouth thing and text is going to really be hard to not press that buy now button.
And I was thinking of that the whole sun business in every chapter, starting out like that. And often if you read a lot of books, which hopefully we all do, you'll find that a particular author will often start every chapter with the same name, like from the same point of view or whatever. And that's kind of annoying. It's good to change it up in all aspects, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Thank you. So the next thing is actually, so we've just talked about how to pay a bit more attention to the beginning of a scene or a chapter. Now we're going to switch to the end and talk about hooks and twists, which I'm pretty excited about.
every time I do this mostly in editing, and sometimes if I'm really well behaved, I'll start thinking about it as I'm plotting, but I'm not always very well behaved. So whenever I start to plan the chapter that I'm about to write, I at least try to think about a couple of things, 5 things actually. I think about the scene purpose. Remember, I say that every time I outline a scene to write, it's a beat, it's the meet cute, it's the dark night, it's whatever. So think about the purpose of that scene. Then there's a goal, the motivation, the conflict. I think we all know those very much. But then I also want to figure out the twist or the hook. I call them twists. In television, they're called hooks. And in books, I think I heard another novelist teacher call it a twist. The twist is you get to the end of the chapter. What technique, what motivation, what words are you going to use to get them to turn the page, to start the next chapter? In television, we talk about buttons in television, which is a whole nother conversation. But buttons are kind of, they are like the ending of a sentence. We have period buttons, we have exclamation point buttons, we have question mark buttons, we have dash buttons. And all those do is to tell you that you rarely want to end a chapter on a period where this is what happened and she goes to sleep, good night. Because why are you going to turn the page? You want to try to end on on a question mark. What happened next? She went to sleep and something moved in the dark. And that's a twist. So you turn the page. Or an exclamation point, literally like something exploded, and then you have to turn the chapter. Once you get all the things you need, all the obligation that you have in that particular beat or that particular scene, once you get to the end of it, okay, great. But now, what's about to happen on the next chapter? And that's why some people do like to write in scenes and then figure out like, this scene would be better to end on because it launches me into the next scene. Or if I break this scene in half and put this scene onto the next chapter, then that's going to get them to turn the page and read through the chapter. But I feel that is a valid way to do it. But I feel that if you just think ahead, how am I going to twist this so that at the end of this, I'm at the edge of my seat? Instead of, in television, we had to fight the commercial break, which is again another good reason to read scripts, to see where the writer thought the commercial break.
That's a really big thing to have to fight, right? Like turning a page is one thing, waiting for 3 or however many minutes it is to the television to the
That's again why I don't understand standalones, because you're a captive audience in a film. But if you're watching a television show, or you better yet, I promise you, start to read it. It'll take you like 10 minutes. There's so much white space on a television script. If you read the scripts and you'll see the end of the act break, you're going to see that it ends in a question, or it ends in an exclamation point, or it ends in those ... where it's like, to be continued, or what happens next. They're always going to end it that way because they are fighting that commercial break. They're fighting the remote control to click to a different channel. So there's a lot of things that we have to fight. So you put your dukes up at the end of every scene, because that's your money. If they're not watching the commercial, that's how television writers would get paid. If they're not watching the commercial, then you've lost your money.
Yeah. So those hooks, would you do the same kind of thing at the end of a book, or is that what you would leave the open door at the end?
Come into that.
Okay,
yes.
all right. I won't. So I have another question. About the hooks, and you talk about the buttons, and so you don't mean it's a literal, like you're not going to put an exclamation mark. It's about the idea of the exclamation mark, right? Like an explosion or a question or a, don't leave it as a boring old V.
Don't leave it. Every once in a while you might leave it as a period. Every once, like if you had a really big action scene and the reader needs a break, you might end it on a period. But the vast majority, a period button where you give them a break and they go to sleep. But the vast majority at the end of the chapters, the hooks or the twists that you leave, a period is not a hook or a twist. It's just not. So if you're going to hook or twist out of that chapter, you have to end on one of those other buttons, any other button except for a period.
Okay, no, that's cool. I like the way of thinking of it. I'd never really thought of it like that before. So awesome. Go you for being awesome. All right. And is there anywhere else you would use a hook? It's really about getting people to the next chapter and the next.
I would suppose that if you write, when I write my chapters, I write one, the heroine for a chapter, and the hero for a chapter. But some people will write both in one chapter. So I suppose that if you were moving from the heroes to the heroine's perspective within a chapter, that would be a good place to do it as well.
Yeah. So you want to get back to her perspective in the next chapter, maybe. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so number 7, lucky number 7 is open doors. Now I'm excited about this. This is the big thing.
The moneymaker. Yes, it's the moneymaker. So first of all, what is an open door? Before I get to an open door, so every story is going to have some type of story event or story question. You want to resolve that before the end of the book. A cliffhanger is when you don't resolve that and you get people angry with you. But yeah, they're still going to buy the book or they're still going to watch next week. Yes, I know. But I think a different way to do that would be to resolve the story conflict or answer the story question. Will the CSI detective guy solve the murder? Yes, he solves the murder. Will Buffy kill the vampire? Yes, she kills the vampire. But then, because we've thought in seasons and we have more episodes or more books to come, you know what the next conflict in the new book will be. So all you need to do is basically write a teaser for the next book and plop it at the end of that chapter or at the end of the book as its own chapter or its own epilogue, and that opens the door to the new story. So then, it's especially because we are writing either series where it's going to be a new couple or a serialized story where their character should have grown over this particular episode of your serial, and then they're confronted with a new problem. So they've grown, they figured that problem out. Now here comes a brand new problem. And I think that's a more elegant way to do this, because it gives me a sense of closure, a sense of completeness. But oh no, oh look, something new. Click, let me buy the next book.
Yeah.
What happens next?
You can even do it rather than just at the end. You can have these characters, like if you know that it's going to be the brother in the next book, the brother is woven into the story, and then you do this epilogue, with him at the end. But you've kind of more invested in them if you know them through the story as well. So it's about being sneaky and knowing what the next few stories are. It's that seasons thinking, isn't it? That's what we want. Thinking. Yeah.
Is it sneaky or is it smart?
Well, both.
That's why I think I have such high read-through, because with my Purple Heart Ranch, you start to, I give whoever the next book is going to be, he has the secondary role in that particular story. At the end of the book, you have a resolution, you have the wholehearted scene where you see the hero and the heroine together, they're happy, woohoo. But then in my epilogue, it's written from whoever the next hero or heroine, whoever that's going to be, they're looking at the happy couple, and then you learn their goal, motivation, and conflict that's going to introduce you to the next story. So you've got the closure, but now you want to read that person's whole story. So you click to read the whole next story, and then I do it again at the end of the next book, and then you click, and then I do it again at the next book, and I do not stop because I want you to go all the way through.
And that is super smart. That's the knowing what the goal, motivation, and conflict is. I think that's important. And I learned this recently where I tried to hide it. I was trying to hide it until later in the story, and it makes the story fall flat a little. So knowing straight up, right, even at the end of the previous book, exactly what that hero or heroine wants and needs and is looking for, suddenly it makes that leap into the next book. That's awesome.
So can I ask, with the next book, do you refer back to that one scene again? So do you kind of, if there's a gap between the actual physical reading time and they've read about hero 2 looking at couple number 1, do you refer back, how do you lead through into the second book, when you start? Do you assume they've already read that, or do you kind of start fresh?
I absolutely assume they've already read it. I do, but I do put enough information into the next book to have a fresh start. So there are some books where it literally that I've read that they literally pick up where I left off at the end of the book. There are some stories for the book that I just had a release yesterday. It's the third book in the series. So at the end of the second book, the hero, this is all still the marriage of convenience stuff. So the hero in the second book is with the bride of that current book. They eloped and now they're going to have their wedding, right? So the hero number 3 is with her, helping her to pick out some stuff because her husband couldn't do it. And out of the dressing room walks the woman who walked away from him in a bridal gown. The woman who his runaway bride is standing there in a wedding dress, still wearing his engagement ring. And she takes off and runs, and that's where I leave it. So book 3 doesn't pick up there. Book 3 then does a teaser where it goes back in time and shows you the night when they broke up. And then you get that scene later at the
nice.
That is the meet cute of the third book. It was so much fun to write.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
It takes a bit of planning. Just saying, like knowing how many books have you written in a, so when you put out book 2, say, have you written book 3 already? Like how do you, so you just, I know the goal,
motivation, and conflict of each character. And I use tropes. So with this particular series, the first book was the rancher takes his convenient bride. So I knew it was going to be a convenient bride. And the second book was the rancher takes his best friend's sister. So at the end of the first book, here comes the best friend's sister, and he's like, oh no. And then the third book is the runaway bride. So the tropes really help me out. And I just put the tropes in the titles too, because that readers really dig that. But what I will do is I will go through and say, book 1, this trope, book 2, this trope, book 3, this trope. So if you know that much, the goal, motivation, and conflict is pretty much already built in.
Yeah. So you can do that. I was just thinking the idea of having this scene where they're in the changing room and the bride with the engagement ring comes out, and then you go to the next book and it's an earlier scene, and then I was just thinking, oh my God, that makes my head explode a little bit if I hadn't already written all of that and know exactly.
I'm ahead enough that I had time.
Because that's genius. I mean, I think it's great. I'm fully on board with that plan. I think it's brilliant how that's put together. I just would be like, I'd want to write all of them before I.
Do you have a Scrivener document that you keep track of these things, or?
Yep, I do.
Hand?
It's all kept track of in Scrivener. I have a YouTube channel where I show you how I set it up so that and I just carry it over. I basically make a world building document in the notes section of Scrivener, and then there's a button that you can click, and it just stays there open for me, and I just keep building on top. So the convenient bride was down here, and then I built on top of that the best friend's bride, and then I built on top of that the runaway, and I just keep building on top and just taking it to the next document.
Okay, nice. That's awesome.
We'll make sure to put a link to that in the show notes as well.
Do you know offhand what the link is to your YouTube channel, or is it at Ines?
It's just Ines Johnson, so it's Facebook YouTube / Ines Johnson.
Oh, yeah. That's cool. So if anyone wanted to go check out
there.
Well, you might get a couple. I'm going to go there.
Yeah, I'm going to go there.
3, 4, 5. Awesome. Okay, so we're at the 7th. Is there anything else you want to add about the open door? Like anything else we should know, or tricks for younger players, things not to do?
Don't give too much. That scene for me is maybe 500, max 750 words. It's quick. I get in, I get out. Don't give them too much.
Okay, that's good.
Oh no, and the last piece of advice that I would give too is, seriously, scripts are free if they're online. Like there's Daily Script, there's Scriptorama. There's a whole website, and I'll email this to you, Trudy. There's a whole website where someone just collects the pilot episodes of scripts, and they just put it on a website by year and by if it's a comedy or a drama. I promise you, just spend a couple of hours each day reading through those scripts, and that's the education that you need to see how they set it up, to see where they take their break. And especially if it's a favorite television show of yours, read the script and then go back and watch the television show, and you'll see what they're doing. It'll start to become really clear. Oh, look where they made that break. Oh, look how they introduced that right there, and then they brought that back at the end. Look at that. Look at how they buttoned that up with a question mark and held you captive in your seat. until they came back from the commercial break, even though you're probably watching it on like Hulu or Netflix, and you probably don't have to deal with
I've been watching Star Trek Discovery on Netflix, and you can tell where the ads are, but they're really good at it too. They have some massive twists, and I've been really enjoying. I know, tricky.
They still build it in there because at some point we all know, because it's how we were trained. It's how we got paid. We know that at some point it's going to go on a paid platform where there needs to be commercial breaks.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've just got a question about your back matter. So you've done the open door. You've led to the next book. With your back matter, Ines, do you include an excerpt from the next book in the series, or do no need to?
There's no need.
Nice.
Once upon a time when I did try to end a series and move on to a spinoff, I tried that, didn't work. Putting that open door, maybe 500-word scene there, and then writing something like with the best friend's sister, writing that scene where the sister comes and he's like, oh no. Then I put in my voice, she's going to come and she's going to get her man and he's not going to be able to do anything about it. Watch this epic showdown in the next book. Click here. Right there for you. And then if they want to turn to the next page, it's just a list of my books.
Nice.
That's awesome. And in a lot of ways, that's so much more, like I just think of an excerpt as the next book, it's the start of something new, whereas you have that designed for this book, designed to be the open door piece of writing. It's so specific and it's got one goal in mind. That is so much more powerful. It has the capacity to be so much more powerful than simply an excerpt to the next book. I think that's very, very smart.
You're not going to see this in television scripts, but if you watch the television show, they're going to tease you for the next week, the next week's episode. Who does this so well? Like The Good Place. Read The Good Place scripts and watch, because at the end they always had an open door. Always, even to the last episode, there was an open door. Does anybody watch that show?
Yeah, I love that show. It was
brilliant. They would have a story problem. They would come to a conclusion, and then in the last couple of seconds, remember, the rug would be pulled out from under them, and you just had to wait until the next week. Was brilliant storytelling.
No, I love that show. Now I'm going to have to go back and watch it for looking for the twists and the
not sorry.
I just it's very good. And they did, they must have been like, I was always going, I'm just going to watch one more episode. I just one quickly. I know it's really late, and everyone else is just one more. So.
Nope.
Yeah.
So what I'm taking from this is that what we're giving you is absolute permission to go and binge watch television and to really hone your skills and read, of course, but it's okay. If you're like me and working your way through Schitt's Creek up to, basically a season a night, it's got some fantastic writing in it as well. I love that show. I love that. I think it makes so much sense, and it's kind of visual too, because a lot of us are kind of, particularly for those of us who are a really visual brain, you can kind of literally watch it happening.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
you
awesome.
learn so much from watching TV. Don't listen to your parents, kids.
Message from the Spa Girls: go watch TV. Yes,
absolutely.
Heard it here. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming in again and
it's been
being
great.
here with us. We've really, really enjoyed spending time with you.
I had a great time.
Awesome. Now, where can people find you if they wanted to go and
I'm supposed to say my my website that's barely been updated. Better place to find me is to go to YouTube and look at what I've got there, or to find me on Facebook, where I actually hang out.
Yeah.
So Facebook or YouTube. I'm Ines Johnson on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I'm Ines Johnson on YouTube. Those are the best places to actually interact with me if you want to chat with me.
Awesome. That would be great. And where can we be found, Shah?
Well, we're going to put the links to Ines's YouTube and Facebook in the show notes. So if you want to go to our show notes at spargirlspodcast.com and just embrace the TV and the scenes and the screenwriting tips. So thank you so much. It was fantastic.
Awesome. And we can be found at spargirlspodcast.com.
I did say that.
Oh, you did? Okay, sorry. I missed
because you don't
bit.
Listen to me, Trudy. It's okay.
No.
No, I never listen to you, Shah. I don't know what I'm talking about.
But we're listening to Ines, and that was just a fantastic session. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Awesome. And we will... Yes, thank you. And we will see you all again sometime. Bye.
Bye.